out.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sorry, I had to take care of nature's call.
That's an important thing. Always, I actually sat down, ate some breakfast, drank some coffee,
Yep.
It's always good to.
I do the coffee thing probably too many times, but it's a good one. Anywho, it's good to see you.
Yes.
Yeah, you've been up to good?
I have been up to goodness, yes. I've been getting ready to launch Spectrum Insights Minecraft, which is a Minecraft server for individuals and families on the spectrum. And
Cool.
All set up to really kind of a different philosophy of community, and that it's not the community is based on consent, and it's based on that things are a learning opportunity, and so we're going to present it that way. It's not based on shame or threat or like if you do this thing on here, then we're going to punish you in this way. We're going to sit back and have a conversation about why, and ask why more than anything, and try to get a different level of engagement and helping kids process and take a moment and reflect on what's going on. So intentional thinking, I guess, is really what we're trying to, help kids do is have intentionality.
Yeah. I mean, that's always a struggle with my kids, is, presenting the communication platform, for them to if they made a decision that we think is the wrong decision, if they want to explain it, that they can, and trying to get them involved in the communication process versus just what's right and wrong.
Well, and it's not necessarily a bad decision or a wrong decision. It's they made a decision, and let's talk about what those consequences are. Not putting judgment on it. It's not good nor bad. It's just it had these ramifications, and those ramifications hurt someone's feelings, or you did something that was not consent based. You didn't ask before you did something,
right?
And so a lot of these things are trying to teach respect, and consent is a big piece of that, right? Like ask before you do something. Think about what these things are, so that you're taking a little bit of time to just kind of settle back into yourself and not be so reactive, because many kids and families who are on the spectrum are really living from that reactive.
No, tell me about it.
Thing, because we grow up and we're overwhelmed, and when we're overwhelmed, we go into shutdown.
Mm-hmm.
And when we go into shutdown, we trigger our flight, fight, freeze response, and we have a trauma response. And that system is engaged. And so you're experiencing the world through a trauma response when you're in the shutdown state. It's not that you can't feel, it's just there's so many feelings, and they're so overwhelming that our natural systems shut down. And this is all based on a theory called the Polyvagal theory by Stephen Porch.
And a little bit more.
What's that?
Can you describe that a little bit more?
So yeah, I mean the Polyvagal theory is there's a couple different elements to it. First is that understanding what the vagus nerve is and what we're talking about. And so the Polyvagal theory is that we have multiple systems that run through from the base of our neck and our brainstem all the way down through all of our different organs, tissues, everything through our chest. It's the vagus nerve. It's Latin for wandering nerve, and it's what is our biofeedback mechanism to our gut brain, which is our instinctual brain. It's the when they say a gut feeling, well, a gut feeling is truly there. We actually have brain cells in our gut, and we have a gut brain, and we have brain cells in our heart, and we have brain cells in our lungs, and we have brain cells in our body. And so if everywhere we have brain cells, and then that's a brain, and the vagus nerve is the central conduit for all of our different systems. And looking at, if we kind of break it up into some different systems, is that we have an emotional system, we have a immune system, an inflammation system. If we have high inflammation, our resiliency goes down. We have the emotional system where we get overwhelmed. We have a spiritual system. So if our spiritual connection is very rich to the universe, then we have and we can't handle that. Then our resilience is lower because we just have too much input. It's about how much we're able to filter in and be able to process. And people on the spectrum who are not neurotypical, we process the world in a different way, and we don't all process it the same way, but we all process it in a way that's different enough that it gives us special superpowers. And so some people, can do math problems really well, or they can sit down and look and count the number of toothpicks, like in Rain Man. Like you could, understand animals and understand their sense of things, and be able to do that. There's all the way across the spectrum. It's just that you have an ability to sense things at a greater level than other people, and I believe that this is there's actually formed in a spiritual connection. I think that one of the primary things that a lot of individuals on the spectrum is that they have their spiritual connection is very strong. That's just from my experience, and it's not something, that's just my, that's just really where, and so I try to honor that. And if I have that strong spiritual connection, then, and that spiritual connection is the thing that allows me to understand what my intentional self, what my intention is here on this earth. Like, we all have an intention. We all have a purpose. We all not everyone understands what that is. And that's part of the thing of life, is understanding what that purpose is and what
right. Well, that foreshadows the conversation I wanted to have with you, which is about how, we come to this earth with a purpose, whether or not that's in mind or something that we discover as we go by. But the world itself seems to kind of quash that by and large, and set us up for a fight. In some ways, that ends up defining our struggle in the way that with this culture, and this culture being so versed in the language of trauma and the language of suppression, we end up depressed and with any number of psychological conditions that they would label, but that all amounts to not doing what we came here to do in community. And most I would think come to the world with the thought in mind of making the world better. And when we can't do that, it leads to depression, hopelessness, heartache, and then with the suppression of that grief, even more so.
The anger and the frustration comes out. It gets misdirected. Those feelings are valid, but they also need somewhere to go.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not actively acknowledging and taking care of yourself. It comes out in ways that are messy.
Right.
And as you're coming out of shutdown, when you've been in shutdown as a child and through your teenage years and you're coming out of it, there's parts of you that are very young, because when we experience a traumatic event, a piece of us does this just totally miraculous thing. They become our protector, and they stand up and they're like, hey man, I need to protect you. And I'm going to stand up and be your protector. And I'm going to split off from the rest of myself. And I'm going to be this filter now. And I'm going to be this on the lookout. This is my job. I am going to be, and the thing is that we are really awesome at doing these jobs.
Yeah.
Like, when we're set up to do something, like, we're on it. Like,
the brain's amazing.
And so we set up, now we have this filter that's set up that is in childhood that we live with, and everything gets filtered into that. Right. And so
right.
I really think that trauma is the thing that keeps us away from our intentional self. Because we all have this human condition of the inner self-critic.
When this warrior figure is up there running the filter all the time, it definitely, I mean, in my experience, it blocks genuine connections to the healing experiences in the community that are supposed to be filling the gap, and that's where the anger and frustration, meant to become compost for the garden of experience.
Yeah.
And when that's blocked, maybe we should just focus on when that's released, and what good this work, the environmental repair work does for that experience, and what communicate, even communing on the web platform of Minecraft together, creating together in community does for that.
Yeah.
Pull the Minecraft in to the eco repair for people that already, they might not totally understand how those go together.
Sure. And so I want to kind of take a minute to kind of talk about the reintegration piece and what's the environment like. How do we, the first thing that we need to do is I personally don't think there's such thing as trauma healing or trauma recovery. I think that it's trauma reintegration.
Okay.
And that what we're doing is we're the whole point of it is to start to have conversations with these parts of ourselves that are our protectors, and we start honoring ourselves with the total awesomeness that we do for ourselves, instead of talking with us with the negative thing, which was reinforced by our social peer group and our home life and our culture. If we have parents who are, don't take the time to validate that what we're feeling is actually true, and that you just need to suck it up and to deal with it and put it away, and why are you crying? I'll give you something to cry about. All of these messages, right, that come back in that says the things that I'm feeling here and how I'm feeling and interpreting is wrong, and there's something wrong with me because someone is angry at me and they're telling me these things. And so that becomes part of our loop. And so the first thing that we need to do in order to change our loop is first recognize how awesome we are as individuals, and loving ourselves, and honoring that piece of us, and just to say, I love you, I got you, we're going to go through this, and approaching yourself with that knowledge and from that perspective. Like, that is the number one thing that you can, that's the thing to master first, is the being gentle to ourselves, because we deserve it.
Yeah, I think a lot of the language we use against ourselves and labels has to do with that. I don't know. I saw this Facebook meme going around where it was like, I haven't had so many failures. It's just a lot of misadventures that didn't all go as planned. I don't know, reframing that story of self into one that lays the groundwork for future accomplishments, instead of becomes a barrier for communication and for doing the work. And so, I mean, when I dwell on my mistakes, I know that's no good for.
There really are no mistakes. There's opportunities to learn, right?
There you go.
And if you can kind of approach it from that mindset, is that, okay, what can I learn from this experience or this situation that makes it so that I don't have to experience this suckiness again, right? Like, this sucks. Okay,
Yeah.
we're going to deal with it. Okay, well, what can I do to make it so, that if I come across this situation that
let's take this different road.
Yeah, what does that look like? What are those intervention points? In our interpersonal, when in my journey, I've my youngest daughter was born 8 weeks early, and we spent a lot of time in the hospital. We were there like 20 weeks as a family. She was there 11 weeks, and she's awesome today. It's been over a decade, and she's just absolutely fabulous. We're really grateful for all that. But that experience and that journey was highly traumatic, in that it's one of those things that just wipes everything, a slate clean, just like it does after a disaster. And, and we start seeing the wildfires and these forest fires and the flooding and the earthquakes, and we see this across communities. But
I had a similar experience where my second son came through, very similar, came into NICU. We were there for weeks. and all that happened in the midst of Fukushima and the fires, and I highly relate to that experience.
And what came out of like when a family goes through that experience, 80% end in divorce within 5 years. Like, statistically speaking, that early birth experience is highly traumatic to interpersonal relationships. My marriage my partner with my girls, our marriage didn't make it through it. But that was where I started, that opened up a whole heart to, like, I was, Sarah's mama. Like, I fed her every bottle, I changed her every diaper. I mixed all of her formulas up, and I have a chart for every single one of her feedings after she came home, for how much she ate, what the calorie count was, because I had to we had to track the calories in there, right?
Keeping track of the poops.
Oh yeah, poops.
Yeah, how much meconium in the poop still? Yeah,
everything. It's like the whole gamut. And we did this, for months. And
we're brothers there. That's amazing. It's good to touch base with somebody else who's been Mr. Mom once or twice.
It's I think it's an amazing. I mean, for me, it was an amazing opportunity and experience, and one that I'm truly grateful for. For me, that really opened up my internal mama.
It's not an experience many men get to receive, but it's becoming more commonplace, I hear, because of the internal breakdowns of the family, the ecosystem, community breakdowns caused by ecosystem collapse and economic collapse that comes from that. And it's all related.
It's all related. It's
related.
It's all the same cycle.
Where when I'm in a flooded state, that vagal collapse state, I'm processing the bigger system collapse and the local system collapse and the family collapse and internal collapse all at once, and it comes flooding. Yeah. My therapists would call that flooding. And so I'm trying to learn how to deal with that and process that. And it's like, as we come into this phase, I feel like maybe humans are learning to evolve by force, by hook or by crook, to process these things quickly, and perhaps too quickly. That we're processing so much right now. A lot of people have emotional burnout, just from paying attention.
Well, I mean, I think that there's a few things in our culture that are kind of fundamentally broken, right? And that have caused widespread isolation and feelings of isolationism. And one of them is that this idea that babies should not be with us as parents when they sleep.
Oh yeah. I don't believe in that. I never did. And we got a lot of flack from the elders over that.
You can't
do that. And I was like, watch me.
We did co-sleeping with all of my kids did co-sleeping. They all were, they crawled up and there are conditions and things where, it's not the best thing to have your kids sleep with you, but if you also set it up and you're aware, and you don't use heavy drugs and alcohol, and as a parent, you're not going to roll over on your kid. It just doesn't really happen.
No,
there's an awareness. Like you have
all the gorillas and all of the does and fawns and all of the nature would be killing their kids in their sleep, because it's just nature.
Exactly. For me, it's the psychological connection that we maintain with our kids. Little babies have no idea what self-soothing is. They're not capable of that emotional state. What you have is giving up, because no one and out of exhaustion. You don't have anything beyond that, and other than feeling isolated and really scared. Because when you have a premature baby, one of the best things you can do for it is kangaroo care, which is skin to skin contact. Yes. That is true of all of us human beings. Like, the best thing that we can do is skin to skin, love, comfort, fill up that bucket.
My premature child, he's all about the hugs to this day. And, that was, they gave it, thankfully we're in a pretty liberal state where they gave that as the materials, the essential materials to new families. That was so critical, and I'm grateful we're blessed in a forward-thinking area. that was part of the material. Thankfully, it's getting out there.
It is, but it's also along, it's a lot of these things are known. They've been known for a long time, but they're not accepted by people, and that's where the things are. Another thing that we have, kind of going on in our society is that when the way that our news is presented to us, it's putting us into a constant state of mild trauma and mild shutdown. And so we're not able to be fully thinking all the time because we have all of these events and external things being pumped into us in a way that is intentionally shutting us down, right? With all these distractions and all these things. And so this is actually part of our culture and narrative today. That we need to be aware of. And once we become aware that this is happening, we can start to look at what our attachment is to these things. Because a lot of these things, we really don't have any skin in the game. We have an emotional sense or a trauma response to it. And so we can reintegrate that trauma, and then that, and we can look at this and go, this is not something that I need to hold on to.
If I can talk about, how it came into the conference, and I've had a how you describe an emotional attachment to the grief around climate change and feeling isolated and feeling like nobody else hears me or hears the other ones that are talking about it in the community where I'm at, and turns out, reaching out across the internet, for example, is a good way of healing that. Getting outside of your own community sometimes is the best way. And then maybe you'll find people there. But what I was getting at is there's a lot of shame and guilt and environmental grief around the climate thing, where, as it turns out, and after listening to Eisenstein's speech about it, where we're internalizing this personal guilt around being the drivers of our own extinction, and it's setting up to where the conversation is coming out of fear instead of love, and it's coming out of fear of collapse instead of love for the planet and love for the future and love for our kids, and that is. It's creating almost, I can describe personally, a state of paralysis, of emotional flooding around it all. That it doesn't grow corn. It doesn't lead to planting trees, and all of this stuff. It creates a story of helplessness, and ironically, gripping those that do care about Earth repair and about fixing the climate, in this fear that it doesn't lead to work.
Right.
And it doesn't, as my auntie would say, it doesn't grow corn. Those thoughts don't grow corn.
Right.
And we're talking not GMO corn either. It's metaphorical, spiritual, like the jewel kind.
No, absolutely. And I think that, one of the, I think that, as we've gotten more technology, we become more abstracted from the natural world. I was lucky. I grew up in the woods. I grew up out in the country, out in Snoqualmie Valley, out here in Washington State, when, you knew that you were in rush hour traffic when you saw one other car in the opposite direction. It was rural, very rural. With my parents in 1980, we didn't get a phone line until 81 because we got one of the first non-party lines in the neighborhood. Right. And this was like, it was out there at the time. But it was also, I grew up in forests and a lake, and I rode motorcycles and did horses, and we went through the woods, and we had power lines and, all of the things. And I immediately wanted to go to the city because, the city was so much better than the thing. And then the older I got, the more I realized that no, actually, growing up in in the country is way better. And I started doing a lot of healing, trauma healing around, growing up. I'm on the spectrum. I experienced the world pretty intensely. I was a highly sensitive kid, that took things really personally. and I took a lot of things really personally and into my heart that, you know, and it's a beautiful thing. And I was fortunate enough to be in a position in life where I was able to hold on to that. And until I got into an environment that was a yes environment. And I think that, I'm so grateful and so lucky that I got into a yes environment right out of high school. And so, and what I mean by a yes environment is like, oh, you want to go do that? Sure. Try. Like, here's go for it. Like figure it out.
Supporting you, your creative goals, your desires to do good. Yeah.
And,
took some years to get back to that. And I'm still setting up trust for that, even right now. And I'm working on this amazing stuff with you and with others. And I'm still that kid in some ways where I'm opening, my shell is cracking, but still like, is this really, are people really saying yes to me right now? Is this true? Could this be real? Pinch me. I must be dreaming. Like,
no. And I mean, for me, that's how I get that. I mean, my background is, I worked at Microsoft right out of high school. I spent a long time there, over a decade. I'm pretty smart. I took a lot of classes there. I didn't go to university. I went to Microsoft University. That was where I did my stuff. I went and did product support training and learned how to code and, became a program manager. That was what I did at Microsoft, was program management and design. And I worked on new things. I worked on all the new stuff. Was really blessed to be able to be with really creative people and in an environment that says, hey, I want to go do something a little bit differently and do that. And, that set it up so that I kind of worked on this new stuff over and over again. And, you become really good at that after a while. And it turns into patents and it turns into these other things. And I got to work on some really, really fun stuff.
Developing for Microsoft. So you were encouraged to do cool stuff early and often, and developed a sense of accomplishment through that work. Yeah. And that helped heal. Integrated.
I think that, what I did was, Microsoft taught me that, Microsoft allowed me to get up into my head and spend a lot of time thinking about things in my head. And, it was, which is great because I love thinking about things and I'm really good at it. And I'm very good at, kind of connecting into the universal creative spirit and listening to that and allowing that to flow and pick up messages, or, I beyond that, I can, it's like, oh, here, I need to do it this way. And I don't understand how I got to that point, but I have an inherent knowledge that this is the way that it needs to go. And I found that when I follow that it always works out really well. So I go with it.
I feel strongly as I've never been put on the spectrum by any kind of analysis, but almost everybody that knows me in my personal life it's like, yes, highly. But I relate to that, headspace and maybe we, talk about where that led into the work you're doing now, or the work previous to the work you're doing now, and dropping into your heart, and becoming more of the one heart, as the Hopis say, and getting into that space.
Well, and I think that happens through trauma reintegration. I think that space becomes easier to access and to be in as you're able to take off the things that aren't yours, that don't belong to you. I mean, trauma is someone put an experience in front of you that was overwhelming and that you're reacting based upon that experience.
Yeah.
It's not
back up into the head.
Right. And our entire childhood is that experience for us. We react to the environment our parents put us into. We don't choose that environment.
Right.
We don't have the ability to make that choice until we're at the very minimum of 18, legally speaking, in our culture.
And school is such a traumatic environment.
School is
everybody says it's a supportive learning environment, but I mean,
No.
it seems to be anything but supportive sometimes and anything but learning sometimes, or at least it's learning in an intellectual way, forcing down from the head
You know,
and not.
yeah, it's not a place where, you know, living from your heart is accepted. You know, when you live from your heart, you're a highly emotional person.
And you're indirectly discouraged by your peers to be genuine and in your heart sense, be, you know, to wear your heart on your sleeve in a public school environment is to basically invite everybody to mess with you.
Pain and suffering. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was one of those kids, and, you know, like, you know, I just was able to, like, not, you know, for whatever, I had enough skills and enough things, or that I was able to, you know, move through it in effective ways. And then, you know, and then get in and do a lot of, like, I did a lot of massage trauma release work, which was really overwhelming at times. Because touch can be an overwhelming sense, even if you don't realize that touch is, or if you really if you're really skin hungry, but don't realize that you're really skin hungry, you know, like you have, like.
Yeah. Tell me about it, man. Me and my ex, co-parent.
Yeah.
She's like, you don't respond. I'm like, I'm up here still. I'm working on it, but.
Well, and it's a process, right? It's not like it's a lifelong thing. But it's, you know, it's like, wait a minute. That experience or that thing, or how I'm interpreting this, is that you know, as you reintegrate that trauma, you're able to now view the world not through the filter that this big, but it's through, you know, the filter that's this big, as the experience of, you know, for me, a 46-year-old, you know, male guy, you know, I experience, you know, I can experience everything through this and this filter set, and not through this filter set.
Yeah. You can one of the more powerful ceremonial pieces of work with this, I was taught, thankfully, a while ago, was to you know, in a visual, you see your child, your inner child is a child that is, you know, suffering in that scenario. You can go comfort him or her, and by embracing that visual, in a way, touches through time and memory, and maybe doesn't take care of everything, but it can say, you know, it's okay, I'm here. And in a way, I'm kind of getting connecting deep about this, but, you know, I remember as a child feeling like I got myself through a lot of stuff, thinking, well, someday this isn't going to be my reality, and I'm going to be bigger and more able to, more powerful, able to deal with this. And I guess that now that we're bigger versions of our kid selves, we can be gentler, kinder, you know, less traumatic versions of our parents and our authority figures we grew up with. And a lot of times I find myself saying, well, my instinctive reaction operating from traditional parenting is to say everything my parents said, which is stow it, put it away.
Put it away, pack it away.
But it doesn't help. It makes things worse. It causes the escalation and the flooding and them and me. And when I reach out and put a hand out and I heart connect, hey, I see you. You know, I recognize your feelings, and it makes some attempt to explain why, even if they can't have their way or that thing right then that they feel like they need, but that there's the bigger community, and in ways that people didn't connect right then for me.
Right.
You know, we're actually, in a way, healing the past, present, and future by connecting in the now.
Yep. And one of the things that, you know, with nature is, you know, I've done lots, you know, through this work over the last 10 years, you know, it's like different things of like what has helped what helps people in trauma, and all the, you know, and the science shows that, you know, left, right, left brain interaction helps bring our executive functioning online. And that's what is going to allow us to have our long-term thinking and planning and strategy things happen, you know, online, you know, being able to develop those strategy things early on is really great for us, especially things like chess and Go and games like that, where your strategy, thinking ahead, multiple steps.
Minecraft.
Minecraft is a great one because you can plan things out and build it. With our Minecraft community, we're trying to integrate the natural world with the virtual world through gameplay and scavenger hunts. And a big piece of what we're trying to do is help kids develop the skills of as we're going out in the world, we see the world, and most of the time we're just kind of in our heads and we're just kind of navigating through and we're sensing it. And so one of the things I think that's really important is bringing intentionality and focus into our daily life and to focus on joy. And so part of it is like having a scavenger hunt where you go out and you find a flower. And so you're intentionally going out into the thing on your walks and getting out into nature and intentionally looking for things at the end of the day that bring you joy. And I'm going to, that's the goal. And you can take a photo of it. And so when you're in a situation where you're feeling a little bit blue or bad or whatever, you can, immediately bring up this thing, and it's an instant dopamine hit. It's like flower, nature. I took this memory there. And
then
so
put it on Instagram and multiply your dopamine from it 20 times over.
And getting your friends and everyone. We are chemically dependent creatures. There's certain chemicals we really like, and we will chase after them. Mm-hmm. Serotonin, dopamine. There's a few of these key ones that we do need to recognize that these things live on a reward system, and sugar,
right?
Believe it or not, sugar. The
monkey mind is powerful.
I
agree with that we're wired for the dopamine and the serotonin, and it's about there's a lot of guilt and shame in culture about chasing those, but it's more about wiring up new sources of those. And fixing the microbiome and taking the toxins out so we can create them again in our body. And these are chemicals our brains are thorough, and our microbiome are thoroughly.
We are nature. So when we put ourselves into a forest biome, we naturally interact with it in ways that are incredibly, incredibly positive for our serotonin levels and our mental health. And the biome interacts with our biome, and we take it 40% of the interactions of everything around someone in and what their biome, 40% in like 3. And when we perceive upon the earth and are able to perceive is something like, and it's been a while since I looked at these numbers, and so it's probably often scale. Like we perceive like 800,000 in a day. Like we focus in on like 2,200 of them and we participate in those events that we perceive.
Right.
And it's only like 400 that we actually take like something like positive action on, like, and that we actually intentionally notice. And so like, the amount of information that we perceive or have the ability to perceive or focus in on is really a lot more than we're ever cognitively aware of perceiving. And so, when we say that we have the ability to create our own realities, it's actually true.
Right.
All the way down to the quantum physics level.
Yes.
This is true, right? This is what we think is what we create in our world.
And it's not just woo-woo, new agey, spiritual mumbo jumbo. It is real science.
It's real science.
Even if you look at it through the neurobiological aspect and every other aspect, it's a spiritual understanding that has a physical body. And I think it lends to a spiritual in the sacred sense, and that which is sacred, redefining that which is sacred as that which is utterly irreplaceable and too complicated to understand, and thereby must be protected before we destroy it. And we know
that inside of us, at the very minimum, the last 7 generations are alive within us.
Yes.
We know that to be true. At the very least, we have the last 7 generations of DNA that's actually alive in us today. And so we have those experiences because our experiences are encoded in our DNA, and those DNA is passed along generations through epigenetics. Like
that, it's this deep connection, huge, immeasurably huge. We're talking about bacteria here. That's the first organisms on Earth, and we don't know for sure it showed up here 3 billion years ago. That could just be when it was able to proffer here. When it finally cooled down enough, it could have come from an asteroid. And you read any biology textbook, that's what they'll tell you.
I mean, a comet, an asteroid, it could have came from the moon or the planet that collided that created the moon. Like any number of life is abundant in the universe. We don't necessarily know what it looks like, but it is very abundant in the universe.
We strongly suspect, probably have a lot of evidence for. We could get into
it may not be life like
highly, but
it may not be life like us. But I believe that life is,
well, they're seeing in the coloration of the red striping on Europa, the cracks in the glacial ice on the surface. There's an infrared hue to it that is identical to dinoflagellates that promulgate in similar crevices and ice flows on this planet, and that's right. Shown in an exact sense by the scientist studying it. I forget his name, but insofar as it could be totally different, it also could be that we're living in this soup of we could be looking at where when we finally do find quote unquote ET life in this solar system, we could be looking at being able to get outside the solar system before we truly find anything we can identify as alien, because everything we find is actually so much like Earth, it's hard to tell. And there'll be a lot of theorists that say, well, it's not different enough yet. And
I think that, they're like, clearly different environments allow different life forms to flourish in different ways. Our oceans are beautiful. If we want, there's more foreign life in our oceans than anything that we, can imagine in our heads. Like there's some scary looking fish out there, and animals.
Yeah.
But they're not, or they could be. It's just, life is really amazing.
Life will find a way, no matter what way, in whatever way it can. That's a toxic cesspool, apparently. And that's kind of disturbing. We don't want it to get there.
But what that tells us is that there is the possibility that there are bacteria to break down all of the craziness and toxic waste and petrol byproducts and nuclear sludge from Hanford and the potential is there.
I agree with that. It's a tightrope we walk, which is encouraging, but that can't get so encouraging that we don't do anything about it. And so
we have to make the investments. We got to figure out this. Those are our most promising.
Lower the inputs as much as possible, but don't be fatalistic about it, because to say that nuclear radiation can't be cleaned up is simply untrue, and to say that oil can't be cleaned up is simply untrue. And we know this from lots of different ecologists, like Paul Stamets with the oyster mushrooms, and people that are working on growing hemp around Fukushima, to not just absorb, but to take away. It dissolves the radiation. I'm not sure exactly how it works, but among other things, that we can throw at the numerous problems. And then we've got assistance in the microbiome is endlessly adaptable. It's I think that the plastics are going to be digested by bacteria that show up and digest them, but that doesn't mean we should keep throwing plastic in the ocean, because I don't want to know what kind of species end up evolving on a plastic world.
Well, it's like we are each one of our, in America, every city and town is all built on the premise of extraction.
Yeah.
And what can be extracted by the local area in order to further typically corporate interests, historically speaking, or individuals' interests or wealthy interests. Every city is not sustainable. I mean, if we turn off the power, what happens? And it's not on a system that's sustainable.
They're designed as colonies, or if you will, they're forts. I mean,
they're domination. They're built on domination.
Yeah. Even a lot of them keep that name. Fort Bragg's, Fort Worden, all sorts of forts that they're relics. The design is a relic of that Jeffersonian expansion into the West that was basically outposts of a central military command, and now it's centralized corporate command and military.
Yeah,
but we're talking about developing into decentralized outposts of humans collaborating directly with nature.
Right. So I think that as we move forward, developing natural building techniques that are affordable and that are safe and that provide us the shelter and the things that we can do and create ourselves or with our communities is the way that we need to go. Paradise, California, and Butte County, they're a perfect example of the opportunities that are here when every one of our houses is a toxic waste dump. In Paradise, 18,000 homes burned to the ground. Every one of those houses and house footprints is a toxic waste dump.
My house burned to the ground, and you don't know how toxic it is until you've got to smell it.
And the cleanup, right? Yeah. Like in the runoff, and the widespread pollution, and like the things for me, what's cemented in my mind is that there's like horrible disaster. All these houses burned down. It's now a toxic waste dump. Well, they were a toxic waste dump before they burned down, and that's what we live in. And our environment that we live in is not healthy for us. The environment that we live in are not healthy for us anymore.
Right. Ironically, systems we created to prolong our longevity and stabilize our lives become, machines that kind of seal our own doom in a slow sickness. And I've been through building technologies. I actually just got my certificate in green building and natural building. But ironically, a lot of it wasn't learning cob or earthships. It was learning the 2x4, the stick house construction, and the corporate construction. And that was to my dismay. However, I got through it, and I learned the system of these things. And I got that in my brain now, where now we could start deploying, or I and so many others can start deploying naturally built or mostly naturally built units that don't have so many toxic materials, and follow the code and get by the laws and the numerous code laws against doing a lot of these natural building techniques. And so on the first day of class, I'm like, hey, teach earthships? And he's like, yeah, where can you do that? And point on the map to where you can get away with that and not have it as like an annexed extra unit, or green, say it's a greenhouse or something like that, to just build a earthship and say, that's my house, I'm going to live there. Highly illegal in many places. And to your point of saying we've got a structure that's set up not for cohabitation with the earth, but for domination.
It's for domination and actually corporate interests. I mean, so much of the industrial building industry has, influenced the code designs so that it has, it's a lot more complicated than it needs to be. Let's,
Yeah.
And part of, one of the things I'm doing right now is we're, I'm working with the folks in Butte County, California, and we're trying to build a natural building demonstration site.
Nice.
To be able to go through the process of getting the things with the county, the permits, what's involved, the architectural diagrams, all this stuff, so that we can do it and be able to have gray water and like a 3-stage digester so that we can recover our poo and set it up for like 35 families, so like 100 people, and like start doing some scaled design work around this, and start doing this as an opportunity to learn, and then work with the local county and work with the state to do this. And then the idea is, we pick 5 housing designs, right? And you pick one of your 5 housing designs, and that pretty much has an instant permit, because we've already, it's just, we got to put it on
a standing example from your model, and
it's already permit. Everything is already there, and then it's building the infrastructure to say, hey, I'm doing a barn raising. It's going to be next weekend, and here are the resources I need. Resources. The food guys. Can you bring the food out? Can these guys bring this guys out? Where can I get the grant here to be able to do this natural restoration? Oh, Fish and Wildlife have a grant, but it's 50-50, and we have to do matching. Oh, well, let's get some volunteers in here, and now we can check after their hours. Now we can apply those hours to the matching grant, and now we have some funding.
There you go.
So, like, one of the things that I've been thinking through and working through and using Paradise as my example, because when I design software for people and situations, and specific. I try to be very specific around what I'm building, because I'm there to solve a problem, and specifically I want to solve a specific problem and for someone, and that's how I like to do my design work. And then from there you can extrapolate out and make generalized solutions, but it's so much better to just focus in and solve something really well.
Bring that into Paradise, California. I want to. What is it? What was the problem you were working on solving there, and how did you do that?
Yeah. So I came in and I looked at 2 individuals. One of them is Matthew Trum. Matthew owns Treetop Permaculture, and he was trying to get swales in to around all the houses that burned down to protect the environment from all the leaching off of all the toxicity. And so he was working on getting access to do this work. And so I was following him in the permaculture, and I've worked with him on doing the eco camp restorations, where we had a day of action at the Pine Ridge Elementary School and the first eco camp restoration weekend in California.
Nice.
How I got involved in that is that I saw Matthew doing this work, and so I looked at what are the, how do we get 100 Matthews doing this work? How do we make this bigger and larger? And I do system design thinking, and this is what I do. So, and I've worked on a lot of other disasters where I'm coming in and I do a gap analysis and say, here's the problems we need to solve. And I'll sit down and write a spec out and design the UI and get it out of my head and onto paper. And then I set it away until I have funding for it. Because it takes funding to do all these projects. But now I have stacks of these projects, relating from all these different disasters, and they start to lead up to say, here's how individuals can get the help they need. Here's how the families get the help they need, and here's how communities get the help they need. And so it's really this focus around personal, individual, family, and community resiliency, and kind of working at each of the different scales. Another person that I saw working there was Alan Myers, and Alan is a filmmaker and a resident of Paradise, and he started helping his fellow citizens out who are falling through the cracks by getting them gas cards or resources or housing and the connections into some type of footing as these disasters are coming down around them, and the Red Cross really kind of made the whole situation worse in Paradise with the way that the consolidation of help happened after the Red Cross came in with all the different shelters. And then
Part of that
people
similar story, like Sandy was the same story, and where the community came in and occupied the moment, it sort of fixed things.
Sandy, I was actually with FEMA and Health and Human Services when Sandy hit. I just started a innovation fellowship with them, focusing on vulnerable populations after disasters and how to build tools in that. I deployed to New York and did a lot of analysis on what worked in Sandy and what didn't, and have those as part of my reference materials on, Red Hook did an awesome, phenomenal work. And I have these are the projects I want to analyze, and I've built software designs so that we can move the ball forward.
That's excellent. That's good news. That's the best news.
And so, so what I've been working with Paradise is, and then the other thing that kind of coming out of my whole federal thing is that this need for community environmental observation networks, being able to look at our environment from a community perspective that our community ran, whether there be floods or for rain or, floods or landslides or any different types of hazards. And so this was part of the work that I was doing at the federal level, is how do we do this type of stuff. And so what after my fellowship ended, the mudslide happened up here in Washington State at SR 530 mudslide. And I was able to jump in and do some work and create a model, a 3D printed model of the slide area for the first responders and for the engineering team.
Nice.
And I came in and photographed that after the slide, and because we were going to try to do it with photos, and it's like experimentation. So, but we figured out we did this work, and I was able to start the design of a environmental observation network with the county that I designed for up there, and then got that transferred to the Darrington School District so that they run it today. They actually own the hardware.
Nice. So there is a biofeedback network established in that community now.
There is a biofeedback. There's the infrastructure for a biofeedback network there in the community now. One of the things that we hit is private property issues and being able to deploy the sensors. And so the sensors are in kits and are ready for the kids to build, but they haven't been able to engage at that level yet in the community. So that's kind of where things, they have the hardware.
Yeah.
It's all designed. We deployed it. It was a Wi-Fi mesh network that ran all across the valley there. It had a satellite connection. It worked off of wind.
Yeah. There's work in like the people bringing back the wildcat in Scotland, for example, and other things. There's group networking projects, all sorts, weather, citizen weather, citizen game cams for the wildcats, and along those lines, even SETI at home, which I run once in a while, and how they networked that new black hole image. And I imagine something like that is in the works and could be in the works there to get those deployed. Yeah.
Yeah. So like I have a design for a Raspberry Pi video camera that's solar powered that you can put out into the field. I have motion mics for landslide, lahars, and avalanches that detect micromotions, and then they can actually track the flow of the device in the actual debris flow, so that you can actually start modeling out the fluid dynamics a bit more with them. And these devices cost about $450, $500 a piece, so they're not overly expensive. They use off-the-shelf materials, and what I've been doing is building the how-to, so the little guides and like refining it, and here's where you buy it, and here's the instructions, and with building out a curriculum for schools where the kids learn about and identify what their local hazards are. They learn about the different types of communication and networking and energy. And we talk about what the needs of the local neighborhood are. And then we have these building blocks, so that then they can, go from this design to say, here's the observation network that is relevant for my local community. Here's how we're going to engage and do these things. And then the kids can sit down and build the sensors and do this.
Nice.
and deploy them, and then the city and everything has an indication network or notification network.
Well, that's STEM education and the whole 9 yards. That's
it's
beautiful.
the STEM education, the whole 9 yards. And so this is what this is the overall program that I've been building all these different pieces into. And so, like last summer, I did a really great workshop with my friend Drew Brewer down in Oregon. And it was like, how do we and the topic was managing planetary collapse, and I realized that these, one of the big things that we have in permaculture when we're starting to look at an ecosystem restoration type level is that we don't have a biofeedback mechanism inside of things. And I realized that these sensor networks are really the vagus nerve for us as we heal. These are going to be the vagus nerve for the earth because it gives us a way to be able to start monitoring and responding. And so, what I developed was a forest health sensor for the California area that was looking at, soil temperatures and the amount of moisture in the soil at different levels that are also keep track of ambient air. And we can put in, Geiger counter and look at radiation. We can look at, ambient temperature. We can look at particles, the amount of particles in the air with these sensors, and they're on the GPS, and they work across this next generation of networking called LoRa, which allows us to send little tiny bits of information really long distances, but integrating that in ways that we can also then create high bandwidth Wi-Fi connections between these points and be able to turn those on and off on demand so that we can maintain and conserve power.
Right.
There's so many, the complexities of these systems. It's really kind of complex on the number of layers and levels that you have to design around and for. But that's what I've been doing for like a long time now, is that I know that these networks need to work when the internet goes away, when there's not a satellite connection or these things, and how do they work? And so that's where I really came up with these ideas of these observation networks, because if I can put them at the elementary schools, then I have a location in a neighborhood which is already a central hub that has communications, and the kids can then expand that out into neighborhoods, and now we have entire neighborhoods that have communications. And then we can come in and put some services like they did in Red Hook, and now we can have homebound programs. We can go door to door and say, hey, do you need help? Yes or no? Yes, you do. Great. What type of help do you need? Okay, I can deliver 2 hot meals and whatever supplies you need. Okay. Now we have mental health after disaster. Everyone's getting the mental health they need.
It seems like establishing these things helps reduce the trauma post-event in
tremendously.
The PTSD factor, to know that there's systems that are watching for another event, and that's got to bring the community together and help the kids sleep better at night too. And
if you have a flood monitor and it's 2 miles away from town, and that flood monitor goes off, and you get a notification of that, you now have 10 minutes to be able to deal with something.
Can make a world of difference.
Which makes a huge world of difference.
You jump in your RV and head for high water.
You can ground. You can get out. You can get yourself out of the situation that could be a bad situation for you and your family.
Yeah.
Prepare for it. There's the latest research with some of the data analytics coming out of the earthquake stuff is that they're looking at potentially up to 3 minutes warning now, using some of the advanced artificial intelligence and AI data mining into it, and being able to detect these different frequencies before they're able to do it.
You put that Facebook link.
I do.
Yeah, no, that was awesome. That's really amazing stuff.
I have been following the industry for a long time now in disasters. When Sarah was born in 2008, I was working back at Microsoft, and I was working in Microsoft Research in their emerging markets team. And I was running the engineering team for how do we make technology relevant for people living on $2 a day in India, Africa, and China. It's how do we make technology for people living at the bottom of the economic pyramid? What are the systems and social things that we need to do? What does the business models look like? Is it even appropriate for us to do that? What is the technology that is appropriate? And I learned a lot through that, and text messaging infrastructures and kind of flipping business models around in micro payments and information delivery services, and like spending time learning about the technology and how it's applied in areas that are not America.
We're gonna keep talking about this because my friends in Africa are gonna love this part of the conversation.
Yeah, and the reason why I chose not to continue, I mean, for after I left Microsoft, I chose to work here in the United States because I have a family and kids, and you can't go design and do these things without being there, and going to spend extended times in Africa was not, it's just not going to happen.
No.
And so that's where I look to say, how do I build a social business here in America?
Yeah.
And that's why I created family-centered technology solutions.
Well, here in America, you would go to, unfortunately, you would go to places like, I can think of ecologically devastated regions,
here,
economically devastated Rust Belt region, inner city Detroit, Indian reservations.
Yep, Native American reservations are a big piece of that in the rural divide in America. There's absolutely places here to do that work, what I focused in on was, since Sarah was coming through this early birth experience, I was looking at how do I build community tools for people going through the hospital stay journey, and how do we, take your care team, because one, we need to develop a care team when you're in the hospital in a family situation, and they don't present it to you that way, that you need a whole team around you that you can rely upon. So you got to develop your care team, and then you got to reach out to the parts of your social network that are the caring pieces, and kind of merge those things together, so that you can get food support and home support and emotional support and these things that make life a lot easier when you can reach out and have a little bit of communication. Yeah. When you're at a point when you don't want to be talking to anyone in your life because it is so overwhelming that you're completely shut down and you're completely freaked out, it's a really, really difficult time. And so that's where I focused on developing software at. And then as I was doing this, I was working at Microsoft and doing these other things because, well, I got babies to feed. Mm-hmm. And this opportunity to join the federal government came across my desk. It says, hey, we're looking for, change makers, people who are coming from private industry that want to come in and make the government a better place. And it rang something in my heart. And so I finally put it off until the very last day, kind of like at the last final minute. And I said, okay, I'm going to do this. And so I just typed it all out. I threw my resume up. I didn't even proofread any of it. And I sent it in.
Sent it. Yeah.
And 3 weeks later, I got a phone call from the Assistant Secretary of Preparedness and Response in Health and Human Services asking me for an interview.
Nice.
And so I did a video interview with FEMA and her, and another week went by or so, and then they said, hey, can you come out here and be out here in 3 weeks? We want you to start October 10th or 8th.
We're talking about a different FEMA of a different time.
We're talking about FEMA under Obama. Yeah. And yeah, this was all underneath Obama. And so I at that time I was working at the Gates Foundation on contract. And so I canceled my contract at the Gates Foundation. I kind of packed up my life and started moving back to live in DC, between here and DC every 3 weeks for the next 18 months. And the government position was amazing. I reported to an assistant secretary. I reported to the deputy administrator of FEMA, had a very high level, get to see behind the curtains. I met with many high level officials in government because I was a high level government official. Yeah. I got to go to the White House. I got to wear my hat in the White House. I got to get, I put up a Wi-Fi mesh network inside the White House and ran it over a mobile cell network.
That's awesome. So you're there like, I can't believe I'm meeting with all these officials, and then you look at your own name badge, like,
it's really weird. It's like this, it's like.
That's very similar to how I ended up in this global earth repair thing. And I was just like, the moment's finally like, there's this posting for this work, and it's everything I'm skilled at. And I'm like, do I do this? Do I do this? Am I ready to bring my life into this? And I searched my soul about it, and it's like, this is you, and you are this right now, whether you're ready or not.
Yes, and step into the middle. Like, the thing I've learned is that when these opportunities come up, you go yes, and you step right into the middle of the flow. Don't just jump right in, do a barrel,
Do it.
to make a giant splash as you come in, and if it stings a little bit, that wakes you up, makes it
Work it out.
okay, you work it out,
Hit the
but
ground
jump right
running.
in, and so I got to do a lot of work with FEMA and Health and Human Services, and work across social media and across like infrastructure, and provide a lot of insight and help different organizations. And so as I left government, I joined the field innovation team to continue this type of work after working with communities, because it's really rewarding. And having being able to do this, I'm pretty good at it and now, and I like to. And so working with the Paradise Guys individuals and the families and everything, it's been kind of a long process. Of a number of different things that I've been designed now, and one of them is I designed a kids program for Pine Ridge Elementary for this summer for all of the kids in the school, and it's kid led, and it integrates them, and it has all the great things in it, and we presented it, and too much, too fast, with not enough time for them to be able to check everything out, and so it got kind of put on pause, and see where it goes from
Still
here.
gets picked up. I saw that work, and it's a really good piece of work.
It's solid. And then on top, and then layered on top of that, we have a parent workshop program and family workshop program, leading people through the process of understanding what trauma is, and educating people about what the polyvagal theory is, and like how different these systems work, and all these things. And then also natural building, and then rebuilding, and then helping people go through the process. The idea is like help them bring out a shutdown and get them on an ability to start being able to do the executive functioning.
And I think a lot of it is rebuilding mirror neurons. That we lose so many mirror neurons as we grow up, and the world and our authorities are not a reflection of us, and those little stars go out. And I really feel like this work brings me a clarity and helps me focus in my heart, to where I can align my brain with my heart, and being around reflections of other people doing similar work and feeling the same way.
And I'm going to say, this work is like, I know I'm doing the work that I need to do right now. This work is also highly traumatic for me, and that I don't have the financial stability underneath me to sustain myself.
Yeah.
And that causes ripple effects through all of my important relationships. And there is I would say probably close to a 60% tax on my available energy at this point relating to that, just because this is scary. I'm doing this work. I know I need to do this work. It's totally in here. It's but the financial realities of our world and our structures, like I'm very rapidly incurring a huge amount of wrath and of pain, and I'm willing to do it.
Yeah. Well,
I prefer not to do it. I'd really prefer this not to be the case. And so, so kind of coming back to me getting my stuff out there into the world, and Minecraft server is going to be that thing that opens it up. One of the strategic thing that I won't say it was a mistake, but something that I learned is that when I started to do this Minecraft project, I was really willing to accept a level of austerity in order to make it happen. And so I intentionally said, I'm willing to suck it up and just make this happen and I'm not going to do anything until this does happen.
Yeah.
And what I did is I created this huge block in my world from an energetic standpoint, because I said, I can't move forward until I'm done with this.
Right. But you've got to be able to get a yield.
But the yield now has been I've been invested 2 years and now, I'm finishing up the Kickstarter story right now to raise the last $7,500, $10,000 I need to launch it and to start the nonprofit and go through the legal review and do it, because the Minecraft servers are done now. Everything's ready. But it's been a huge amount of work and investment.
Yeah. Sometimes you got to do what you got to do.
But one of the things I learned is like and then I started this year of abundance. This year is like everything we do is with abundance, even if or the potential for abundance, and we're gonna either it fills up my heart, it fills up, my pocketbook, because that does need to happen.
Or we got to wire this. Seeing energy or seeing money as a virtual energy system. There are the system is set up with certain energy parasites within, and that's why it's with that siphoning action happening, it's hard for the capital to get out to where people are working on the ground. But it would be great to change that. That's one of the most important conversations I think we need to be having, because keeping the lights on while we're doing all this, and theoretically the abundance should flow with abundance. And one of the things I'd heard from like Raymond and Organic Food Kenya is that to get some projects going and set time aside to get certain projects going, like for him it was chickens, for you it's Minecraft server, and where you get these feedback loops that generate more and positive, that feed some of that into more and better, that generate more and positive, and to the abundance aspect. It seems silly that we're working on the abundance of a living biosphere, but that goes to show how the economic system is set up to encourage extraction and profiteering from that biosphere rather than the alternative. You got to flip that on its head. Yeah. Okay,
yeah.
I'm talking now.
and that's like one of the more difficult things that we're going, this transition, money system transition. And, it's like, I like money, but I don't care about money. It's not my motivation.
Yeah.
I care. I deeply care about money and how it affects my relationships.
Yeah.
But I don't do the work that I do because of money or for money.
Right. It's like, oh God, it's so ironic. I mean, I've been in this social entrepreneurship for many years, so I understand.
And I also want to be like, my ideal company, like Spectrum Insights is going to go into the Community Resiliency Project. That's a nonprofit, but I'm not a huge fan of nonprofits from an energy perspective. I think that a for-profit company is there, but so I'm looking at a collaborative social purpose corporation collaborative where it's employee owned, so that as we build content that everyone and programs and services, that everyone who works on those things has a long-term revenue stream. So 15% of revenue gets put back into the people who create the content and the stuff. Like, I have business models in place that allows these cycles to happen so that there's long-term sustainability. I've personally designed software systems that have created $1 billion in revenue for a company, and the long-term things that I got out of that was this much.
Oh, I'm right there with you, brother. I help people become millionaires and dine with the mayor of London and have their canapes, and I ended up begging for rent money from family and from my employers. It was ridiculous.
And we should,
people that are just interested in making the world a better place through their work sometimes get shafted. I'll just be straight up. People that want to profit. But the cooperative aspect, setting up co-ops, is a great idea. And I don't know if that's nonprofit, for profit, both.
I think that it's healthy to have profit built into your system. It's a primary thing of life.
Things nonprofits can't do, raise a profit.
You can have profit in a nonprofit. It just can't. It has to be redistributed for the good of everyone. Not one individual can come off of that, which is fine. I think but at the end of the day, it's. I think that having profit is a good thing, and that it's a good driver in life, and that and it ensures that the work that you do will continue to do. Whereas a nonprofit is, you get to the work and then you're like, can I have some more? You need to have a business model. You got to have revenue. You got to have.
Yeah, There's a lot of talk about that, and there's a lot of demonization about corporations and the financial system, but there's a big difference between a multinational for-profit corporations that's extracting the resources like Nestle, and multinational for-profit cooperative corporation that is sharing the resources like Equal Exchange. I don't know about how they're still doing with that, because you know, things tend to get corrupted over time. But I'd love to be I'd love to be wrong about that, and I'd love for them still to be doing good work. But that's still yet different than WWF or any given nonprofit corporation, which is yet another kind of corporation. So when people go out and say, I hate corporations, they may not be fully informed as to what that really is. It's just a legal framework of people cooperating on a board.
I mean, it's a legal framework to it's a legal framework to create a liability protection again for the people who produce products or produce something and the people who consume them. And originally, when an idea of a corporation there was as it was incorporated at the county level, and that it had a social benefit in that it wasn't this, or at the state level. Initially it was a county, and then it was at the state, I believe. But it's not these multi-state. That's when we get into multi-state commerce and now multi-international commerce. There's no. Originally, corporations were beholden to the areas that they lived in, and they were, and then things got really perverted through a whole series of corrupt decisions through the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
That turned these entities into the 14th Amendment of equal protection. The corporations had equal protection as people, and
the Citizens United decision.
This goes way back. This goes back 100 years. This is
before that.
Yeah, this is this is where all these things are. This is like the 14th Amendment. Yeah,
these are the things that are in deep like a tick.
This is where we have to go. Yeah, this is where we have to go back and start, kind of peeling back the layers to understand.
And before Coolidge even and all that stuff.
Yep.
Wow.
So there's actually more write-ups on this right now, just because of anyway. Yeah. For me, the one of the big messages that I've downloaded or from the universe in all of this is that as communities are impacted, like Paradise, California, and in Butte County, and such a widespread trauma happening, and in this case is really kind of a lot more suffering on top of the trauma than usual, because of the amount of time from the event of it happening until people could go back and do a physical and visual processing of that, which was several months before people. So people were in this traumatic limbo of not being able to reconcile anything for months.
Wow.
And a lot of them, a huge home, there's still over 2,000 people homeless from directly from the campfire in there.
That situation tends to keep the trauma going. And,
how Red Cross responded, wasn't good. And so, the trauma pieces here and the environmental, they just come together because, we are part of nature, and getting into the white space, like white space or flow, is really where the trauma reintegration happens. And so getting yourself into situations where you're allowing yourself to be in that meditative kind of space is really beneficial, especially when you're processing things.
Yeah, that's what I find. And even the dirt, getting the dirt on your hands, the soil on your hands, such a big deal. The microbiome and the humus pulls these toxic chemicals right out. And I firmly believe in getting soil on my hands every single day and eating brown bananas. Both of those, among other things. I'm not a huge kimchi fan yet, but I'm getting there. Sugar fermentation gives, I see that as a boost to my microbiome. and it helps. And I've also heard that the bananas in general increase your serotonin, but probably, and then when I heard that your microbiome is producing a lot of it, I'm like, well, brown bananas, which with a little bit of spottiness always tastes a little bit better anyway. You're 80% primordial soup over there. You're a walking water balloon of bacteria. 80% on scan. So, I like having a healthy set of culture. There's consciousness there, obviously, but it's more like nature is the womb for our consciousness. And only by going back there do we get the story, the uncorrupted story, pre-consciousness of where we need to reset and recalibrate and if you will, defragment our own personal operating system by going back to the source material. Mm-hmm. If you could use a information system analogy, it is, though. It's the information system in our brain and in our bodies and our actual DNA and our microbiome interacting with that greater system and bringing healing, bringing integration, whereas regarding ourselves as separate and living in these separate lifestyles and these separate units and these actually toxic units and lifestyles is creating the problems. The only answer is reintegration with nature. It's the only real answer. Minus all these other social tangents, everything else comes back down to this. And it's actually not, it's not just a talking point. You see it on the archives and the articles coming out and all of the work coming out.
All of the science points to all of this being like, there's a here in all of this that is really key. And
here.
There's a here in all,
coming back to place. Back to place in nature.
And so, and this is where, and so kind of tying this into the, like what are the kind of the next steps of how we get here? Because I think there's a lot of, this is what I've been thinking about with Paradise, because we're in a situation where we have widespread trauma. The kids need a lot of help and being able to do that and be able to form that. And that's I spent a lot of time focusing on that. And so we have the kids program, and now we have a parents program. Now we have a natural buildings demonstration program. So people are learning the skills about like how to actually solve the problems of their own housing situation there. And what are these techniques, and start thinking about how we live with nature and regeneratively with nature and really in a more balanced approach. And then working with the local government to figure out what that looks like so that we can do this on a wide scale. Yep. And widespread to be able to pipeline this through. I mean, ideally, we would have systems where we can go and create thousands of new homes for $35,000, $40,000, $50,000 a piece, somewhere in that range, which is like a fraction of what it is. And it's accomplishable because, we're working with a few designs. We know how to reproduce it. We build the infrastructure to be able to come in and do it. And we have camps, where we can come through and we can go through a healing process, a group healing process where we can help people with the feeling of isolationism. We know specifically like MDMA and ketamine really help with reestablishing that inner self, the inner sense of self in early childhood development that is removed when you're removed from your parents and isolated. Yeah. Like that void that you don't know that you're feeling, but you know that you're feeling, that it's just not there, that there are, specific things that really do help reestablish that relationship, because the trauma is so early that you're so far,
and you're saying we could, through community experience and this kind of integration, we can start to learn to manufacture that internally again.
We can reintegrate it so that is no longer a void or a hole that we're walking around with.
I know a lot of there's the drug culture, and when you say MDMA, the first thing that comes to mind is ecstasy and the rave culture. but that does go to explain why this sea of young adults end up drawn to this sea of other young adults participating in a culture that is community. It's missing community,
and
driving that, and literally a lack of the neurological transmitters in the brain.
Well, yeah, I mean that there's a lot in our development that we're lacking in our cult. There's many things in our culture that greatly affect our mental health and connection and ability. And I really believe it's intentional, that this is intentionally done in the American culture in the 20s and 30s.
It definitely drives corporatism in the corporate state.
As part of a control and corporatism. And because it was spread through the medical industry, which, medicine is the most traumatic thing that we have in our entire thing, especially for women. 100% of women experience the medical system as a highly traumatizing experience, at least at one point in their life. For example, so, as we're moving forward, being able to set up a camp and a healing camp and work camps are going to be an important piece of this. And the spiritual aspects are going to be there, in that we want to be able to instill a internal gratitude of earth and the things that we do from the time we wake up till we go to bed, and be conscious of that. So be very grateful around the environment and be thankful of nature and the bounty and becoming with that gratitude and respect.
Uh-huh.
And I want that cemented in and to our rituals and routines, and that each person develops their own, and they may come together as part of a group collective thing that people do, but it's each person has their own protocol as part of their own self-care agreement. And this is like one of the things I've been really working on, is this idea of a self-care agreement and being able to have that accountability for ourselves, and then, but also sitting down and working with our kids, where our kids can define their accountability and what they need to do to take care of themselves. And then you can integrate that in the future with my Minecraft service, where I can say, hey, you want to come on to Minecraft? Cool. Did you do your homework? Did you brush your teeth? Did you do these things? And I can be an accountability partner for
dude, I know the first server we're logging onto when I get my kids set up with Minecraft.
And so that feature will be enabled if I can raise $50,000 on my Minecraft server. That will be the first feature that I will pay to have implemented. So as part of my Kickstarter. So if I get to that is my extended Kickstarter goal, is that feature set. I think that I think there's value here for parents, and that's and that's what I've been trying to do, is like, how do we add, where can we add value and make it so that the experience sucks less?
Yeah, that's what I'm all about. It's like childhood is
say that we're going to have a happy, joy thing. It's all about, let's just make this experience suck less than it currently does. And if we keep just trying to make it suck less, then it's going to get a lot better.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not
oh God, I feel like my kids are caught between a rock and a hard place, because, if they're in home and then there's emotional trauma in home from siblings, and then they go to school and there's emotional trauma from school, and official trauma from teachers, or the fear of not producing or not being up to snuff, and then from their peers, and then they come home, and I would love it to suck less.
The world, my perception of the world is much different today than it was when you and I, I'm 46. So, I graduated in 91. I grew up as an 80s kid,
Yeah. Just one decade previous to me.
Yeah. But it's like the thing that, like, what my kids are experiencing is so dramatically different than the reality that I had. Yeah. We had, there was no concept of a cell phone. We had CBs. Like, we wanted to talk to our friends and neighbors, right? Like, we talked on CBs because
you were one of the Stranger Things kids. That was you.
I was. Yeah.
With the CB radio and the.
Yeah, we had CBs. We had a train whistle, that we used. My parents would call us home using the old
train whistle. Yeah. Well, we still grew up like that. We didn't come up with a lot of the technology, but
My parents were into
a
technology.
lot of the social issues that the kids are going through nowadays, going through growing, going to school with families where the kids are allowed to play endless Call of Duty, Modern Warfare, and so much. It has changed so much in society above and beyond just technology. That it's a completely different world. And I still, growing up in the 90s, I sort of still grew up feeling like the world was a supportive place, and that we were going to work together to fix the rainforests and maybe go to Mars and all of it. But sometime in the early 2000s, a lot of that got completely blown up in a lot of ways, and then we fell into almost like this nightmare pocket as a society. And that's where the kids ever since has been coming up. When I talk to really people that are born post 2000, it's like a different planet. And in some ways they don't feel that support from the world, and they kind of feel like a devil may care almost. So it's going to be hard work. And I think that your work in connecting to people, on the ground, and families on the ground to support this coming back together as community is critical, because there's a big disconnect out there. There's a lot of violence and a lot of shame. And anyway, I wanted to end on a good note, but did we? Are you in Washington? Where are you?
I'm in Shoreline, Washington. And I'll probably be heading down to Paradise and do a summer camp there, rebuilding camp there, and live over there this summer, coming back and forth. And and you can. I'm on Patreon as well. So patreon.com/resiliency. Come and help try to come and support this work. It's
We will get the I'm gonna put the Patreon link, your Patreon link, next to ours when I do the description, when I do the posts, and we're gonna do all of that. We'll integrate that.
And I would love to hear you guys' feedback and review it and all that as well. And then I'll also have my Kickstarter for the Minecraft server.
We could do another Zoom and it'd be a collaborative. I do some screen share. We work on that. We'll collab on that. Great. My back teeth are floating. I gotta go. Bye, everybody.
Bye.